There's something out here with us. Fun. Unfortunate Spacemen is a hidden role game, like Werewolf, Mafia, Trouble in Terrorist Town, among some others. It was an early access game in 2016, but in 2020, it finally came out. It's also a free-to-play game now, and I mean actually free-to-play. By that I mean there are tons of cosmetics you can either buy or unlock. A lot more than you'd think, a whole lot more. But that's it. No loot boxes, no pay-to-win perks, no pay-to-not grind garbage, and you still have a lot to play around with for free. It's the ideal system and very welcome. There are a few different game types, including a co-op story-based campaign and also a co-op wave mode. I don't have much to say about either, they're not the focus of the game. Okay, I have one question. Who would play Dusk with a joystick? That's like using a Switch. Hey, stop it! So this will be all about the shapeshifter mode. With all that said, let's get started. Graphically, things look good, especially for a lower budget game. The lighting and effects are solid, and there's some real atmosphere to some of the levels. Other maps get sillier or downright bizarre, so not everything looks like a horror movie. Whether it's ancient ruins or an underwater base or Ringworld suburbia, there's a fantastic variety here. Having 15 maps is a lot more than I expected, because sure, it makes sense to have the things Outpost 13, and the train murder mystery doesn't seem too far-fetched, but the space farm, I didn't foresee a space farm. It would have been easier to stick exclusively to space stations and spaceships, but they went above and beyond, so there's cool stuff to see. The spacemen themselves are colorful and have relatively simplistic designs. All the cosmetics can get silly, but they don't push it too far. The character colors are assigned per round and cover most of the model. That way, no one can intentionally make confusing camouflage for their costume, or anything that would make accusing the monster more difficult. Speaking of the monster, I like the design of that too. I like the compact space look of all the weapons, just good art direction all around. It also runs very well for me and can still be knocked down to potato mode. So all good so far, but I do see some issues. If you start the game in a higher setting, you may notice that things are blurrier than they should be. That's because it's another Unreal 4 mystery setting game. Chromatic aberration along with who knows what else are tied into the post-processing option. Knocking it down to medium fixes it, but it might make the lighting slightly worse, I just don't know. So that being separated out would be nice. There's also a diegetic shaky HUD, which I don't mind too much in game, but it does look pretty bad in the footage. I've heard complaints about it because it's on by default, but there is an option for it. There are a lot of nice options in general. Now I'm sure some people are already turned off by the style of the game. You know, why not go full survival horror and embrace being a thing game? That thought did cross my mind when I first started playing it, but after a while I realized that, yeah, this was the right call. Pure horror can work for single player or maybe a smaller multiplayer group, but when you have 16 random people in a match, there's gonna be hijinks. From the sprays down to how you hold a stun baton, this is very much a source multiplayer kind of game. So embracing that rather than trying to make everything dead serious does help contribute to players taking the game more lightly too. It is a delicate balance though, and there are still scares to be had. And I do think one recent thing did tip the scale a little bit. All the maps were adjusted to be brighter on account of them being too dark before. I think this went over well on some of them. They're still dark enough to maintain the atmosphere, or they could have been brighter in the first place. Others look really washed out after this change. It's okay for some maps to be dark because now these sections just look gray. It's well intentioned, I just think some maps got hit too hard. But that's really about it as far as my graphical issues go, and they're all technical. As for the sound, it's good, mainly in the gets the job done category. My biggest issue with sound isn't really effects, but just that on some small maps, proximity chat can be heard everywhere. That's not the fault of like a sound library though. God damn it. Hang on, I need to assert dominance. Oh! So that being tweaked a little would be ideal. Okay, onto the gameplay. In Shapeshifter mode, you're either playing as one of a team of spacemen or a monstrous imposter. There's an in-game tutorial mission for each one, which you really should play. It'll save you a lot of headaches. But there's also a quick tip guide in case you only have an hour to live or something. I'll still throw down the basics. As a spaceman, you're here to do your job. You have a few things to do, which are tracked up here in the upper left. This is made up of clearing debris, activating transmitters, and conducting research. Research means sealing a sample, waiting for it to seal up, and then taking it to a mass ejector. When all jobs are done, a shuttle arrives which you board to win the game. Sounds easy, but someone is trying to make your life very hard. Enter the monster. Currently there's only one per game because that's all you need. Even against a team of 15 people, they are a force to be reckoned with. They're out to slow the spacemen's work almost as much as a real corporate inspector would, and ultimately they're out to murder everybody, disguising themselves as whoever they please. If the spacemen discuss and cooperate enough, they can sniff out the monster and gun them down. That also means victory for them. With this in mind, the monster must work tirelessly to erode the trust and friendship between the spacemen. When they become mistrustful, selfish, and anointed, the monster's basically already won. That's the main idea, but each side has a lot of different tools to shake things up. In the direct sense, more powerful weapons will start spawning on the map, but spacemen will have to fight over the canister for them. Clear-headed spacemen will work together.
Thank you. If anyone wants a grenade, there's one in here.
Other times they push and fight for the drops, accusing the other of being the monster. Because when you don't know who's human, you don't know who should have the railgun. Outside of supply drops, maps have all kinds of treasures hidden around. There are scanners, sentry turrets, all kinds of grenades, more weapons, the list goes on. The monster has innate abilities. Its main trick is turning into a Power Rangers villain and slapping your shit, but it can also consume its victims, both to heal up and to hide the body. You can become the victim or anyone, like Pizza here.
What? Who are you? Oh, hey, Pizza.
Hey man.
Hey, that's a fucking dead body.
There's gonna be another one.
Pizza! Pizza!
There's an art to being the monster, so here's where things get advanced. Monsters can burrow into the ground to ambush. They can lay eggs with horrible facehuggers, but that's still surface level stuff. Along with gear and weapons, there are perks. Spacemen get 3 of them. You unlock more by just playing the game and leveling up. Monsters also get 3 perks, along with the regular Spaceman 3 perks. How you put these together can radically alter your game. If you're being sniffed out by trip mines or thermal goggles, you can be immune to them. If you like the panic that a power outage causes, you could use a perk like Nocturnal. Now you're as evil as a real power company. Still, your disguise meter is limited until you have to change, and they'll always have some way of sniffing you out. So the ultimate weapon is playing the social game, finding the right patsy and making everybody blame them for their problems. Murder a spaceman near another one. You could run up and murder them too, but instead, you can crawl into a vent, travel across the map, then scream into the radio about how they did it. You could just cut the power and go on the hunt, or leave a remote arm there instead. Then cut the power when you're talking about who the monster could be. It wasn't me. I was right here with you guys. Space is also a dangerous place, so if someone sees you, compromised, you can arrange a little accident when they ask too many questions. Or you can bait some traps with spaceman work. You have so many ways of being a trickster. It's why I like the game so much. Both teams have so many tools to try and get the upper hand on the other, but it's still a social game. You have tools to enhance the cat and mouse game, but there's no instant win button. Figuring out who the monster is only half the battle. You still have to work as a team, chase them down, cut off escapes, and, play the game to get them. You can mess up and lose track of the target, but it's usually easier to find them again.
Yes! 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 That was perfect.
The game has a solid foundation. There's plenty of room for new kinds of tools and weapons and monster powers. And speaking of those, the latest patch introduced something major. The Tribunal system, aka the accusation/vote out the bad guy system. This has been a minor controversy in the community. Is Unfortunate Spacemen going to be casualized into being Among Us? Of course not. Do you know how much game they'd have to strip out to do that? So that's unfounded, but there's no denying that Among Us was likely a big influence for it. I've played the game both before and after this was put in, so let me tell you how it works. When a tribunal is called, you have the option of moseying over to a safe zone and voting on who the monster is. There's a discussion period. People talk, type, use the emote system, whatever, you try and figure it out. Some bodies have been reported, which you can cross-reference the map for, and if you're lucky you might figure it out immediately and then murder who doesn't belong. However, a vote doesn't mean instant death, and a clever monster will be more tricky. The spaceman who wins the vote is marked as a suspect. Once that color is marked, the monster can never turn into it again. So if they're currently that color, they'll be dramatically forced out of their disguise. If not, it just means they have one less hiding option. If a spaceman is marked, they have a health debuff and the monster can see them through walls. So it can help the spacemen, but it's also another tool of manipulation for the monster. Convince them to chase the wrong guy. Wrong guy defends himself. Wrong guy looks more guilty. A death always strengthens the monster, so the more infighting that can be caused, the better.
Where'd he go? Where did Silver go? He was just here.
He shot at me, I think he's the monster. Combine that with the chaos of a colorblind virus or some jammed communications, and you're in for some interesting court days. People don't always instantly gun down the suspect, but not being the suspect helps your chances. I didn't kill these guys.
Welcome to the company tribunal.
Come on, we gotta go to
Someone
court.
will belong on this station. Please
You can trust me.
and cast your vote.
I lied!
The tribunal is called by the game, no one can just spam a button for it. I've played a lot of games and I rarely saw more than 3 in a match. Plus the fact is attendance is optional. You can't work on some tasks, but I don't see it as disruptive as some people have made it out to be. If anything, having most everyone here has caused a lot more interesting things to happen. In one match I played, the spacemen recreated the blood test from the thing. One put down a monster detecting trip mine and then other players had to walk through it in sequence. I never saw something on this scale happen in a match before the tribunal. In another, the players figured out 100% who the monster was, who was both not there and out of earshot, so teams of hunting parties were assigned to go get him. I've seen a lot more cool emergent gameplay stuff like that happen after the patch, whether it was players organizing or finding interesting ways to make a suspect. If the system was gone, I would miss it, but I understand why some people still don't like it. Ideally, I think it should be a server option. That way everyone's happy.
I'm just suspicious, I'm not actually the alien.
I've had too much fun with Space Court to see it go away. So I think it's a good change, and no, I don't think the game is turning into Among Us. Having minigames for tasks would be a good idea though, because the tasks as is can get pretty repetitive. And you're not that vulnerable doing them, so some high-risk ones would be welcome. Maybe depositing a sample would be a 2-second animation or something. I rarely see anyone get pushed in. Add anything to ramp up the hijinks or cause conflict. Once again, finding the monster doesn't mean the game is over. It's the tension, the final stages of the game, the Mexican standoff. Someone hears the monster and the fight is about to begin. Well, we're about to know, and oh, colorblind, who is it? Who is... Oh. I love being a spaceman. Unfortunate Spacemen is a joy for me to play. Enough scary and silly things happen to keep me coming back to it. That said, I think my biggest issue with the game is the perk system. And I say I think because the game seems in a pretty good balance place right now. It's anecdotal, but I haven't seen monsters or spacemen steamrolling either way. While some perks are fine, some seem to do way too much. How about this boots one? You can't go out of airlock traps or ejectors. Also, the monster can't see your footprints. So that's immunity to 2 different stage hazards and sneaky footprints all rolled into one. I think this perk existing helps make seeing the ejector kills rare. Compare to have an extra door key card for locking doors. Swiping keycards is easy, so it's not that appealing. How about this monster one? Immunity to flashbangs. You can see everybody's health. Trip mines don't detect you. Scanners and thermal imaging don't detect you. So much for the blood test. Void Beast, you gain a blink ability. Your egg is now an electronic bomb. You move quieter. Compared to, you can eat bodies more often and they leave no evidence. You mean the bloodstain? Some maps already have bloodstains. Some perks just have so much more rolled into one, especially with how many trap and detection immunity ones can be stacked. If the game had more gear, that would justify it, but right now, there's not enough. After playing a lot as a spaceman, I start considering almost all detection gear to be unreliable. The counter perk is good enough for most monsters to pick it. As a monster, I never want to risk pushing someone into an ejector or out an airlock in spaceman form because the chances are too high they'll be immune to it. So there are a few perks and they'll make either map gear or map hazards ineffective or useless. Someone being immune to a trap should be oh shit, not oh of course. A rework would be a great help there, so in the meanwhile, I can instead confirm the worst thing in the game is duress. If this thing actually loads, you are in for some jank. Objects will stutter and lag, the map design is just bizarre with hazards everywhere, and most of the time the monster just kills himself on accident. Please, stop voting for this map.
If everyone wants to die, walk in the strip mall really quick.
All that said, Unfortunate Spaceman gets an easy recommend from me. After all, it's free on Steam. You can get there easy from deaderspace.com. Huh, guess I like that game. So give it a try, and if you liked it, give it a nice review. It's nice to see a free-to-play game without a giant asterisk next to free-to-play. That's it for now. Come back next time for elves, and probably rats. Or maybe a church. This one was shorter than last time, less insanity to process. Any indie or AA games I'm keeping an eye on. Atomic Heart, Phoenix Point, even though that one's out already. Humankind, even though I don't think that's an indie game anymore. Oh right, Gloomwood and Ultrakill. They're also by New Blood, who published this game, and they're really good. They have good demos. Ultrakill especially has an insane amount of tech in it. Thoughts on the Mystery of the Druids remaster I mentioned? I mean, it's probably not happening. Probably. Have I thought of doing a series of smaller games in one video? For a brief while, I thought Dead Space 2 and 3 might be like that, but there was too much to say about 3. Off the top of my head, if it was anything, it would be Serious Sam the first and second encounter. The second encounter especially, and I could see them being folded into one video. Still angry about Mass Effect 3. Well, with a remaster on the way, keep an eye out for any articles saying that the ending for 3 was ahead of its time and not that the game was horribly rushed, and that was one of many problems. People play the new DLC ending today and think that was the original, and no, it was still so much worse. I might have more to say about all that eventually, but not yet.
Yeah.